So, thank you, Professor Ruttler. This was a wonderful introduction for me with regard to the theme that I will talk about today, and that is the vocation of business leaders. Now, you might ask yourself the question, why are we talking here today about the vocation of a business leader? Why is it a vocation? And this is actually a theme that I've been talking about a lot in the past years to business leaders around the world. And it's a theme that really interests me because I myself, in my professional career, have gone through this process of actually finding my professional vocation. And this has been a very enriching process. In fact, one thing that my colleague did not just mention is that I started my career as a business lawyer. So I had the opportunity to get to know the business world quite well from different sides. This is the advantage one has as a lawyer and as an attorney. So I can very much identify myself with many of the issues that you are dealing with. So I'm talking about the vocation of the business leader, and I would like to give you 7 items to consider, 7 points that are important when it comes down to the question, what is the vocation of the business leader and how should this be lived in practice? The first point, and this is the starting point on which everything else rests, that I think that you as a leader in your organization should always have as a key to whatever you do. And that first point is that there is no exception as to the absolute nature of the human being's dignity. If you as a business leader are aware of the fact and are willing to accept that every human being with whom you are working, whether it is the employees that you are responsible for, whether it is the shareholders, whether it is the customers, but every single human being has this absolute dignity, this individual dignity that every human being comes into existence with. And this is an absolute key starting point when it comes to leadership. Because if I as a leader am not capable to understanding that and working from that premise, sooner rather than later situations come that Professor Ruttler just showed in this very revealing video. Because then you start treating, for example, customers as cash cows, simply as cash cows, and you think that they should have their 8 accounts. This man certainly, I dare say, never really went through the process as a leader to really regard every one of his customers, even if he doesn't know them, as an individual human being with dignity that should be treated with dignity and not simply as a cash machine. So the absolute dignity of every single human being, that's the starting point. The second point, and here I'm quoting a business leader that I had the great honor to personally know and call as one of my friends. This was François Michelin. He was for many years the CEO of the international Michelin company that we know from, of course, the Michelin Guide and the tires and many other products. And he had taken over from his father the company. And François Michelin, he unfortunately died a few years ago. He wrote a little book that is called And Why Not?, where he speaks about the vocation of the business leader and especially of the vocation of every single human being on the working place. And one of the fascinating things that he says there is that the mystery that exists in every man and every woman should be recognized and acknowledged. Or, to put it in more simple terms, it is important as business leader that we see people as they are. That we see people as they are. This is vital. And this also goes again back to this first point of acknowledging the dignity of every human being. Seeing people as they are, finding the mystery in them, allowing them to have that grow in the work that they are doing. And François Michelin always famously said that he has always worked towards it as CEO of this very successful company to make sure that every single person in the organization, from the factory worker to the manager to the custodians, etc., that they would all be able to find their professional vocation within the organization, meaning what they are meant to do and what, so to say, answers their specific talents. And he would really spend a lot of time also with his managers on making sure that everybody taking care within the organization of the people that they are responsible for would really be able to unlock those talents and unlock the specific vocation that they have in the organization and contributing to it. That's the second point. A third point, this is also key, and this is what John C. Maxwell says in a book that I highly recommend you to read. It's called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And John Maxwell says, serving others and showing others the way are two critical components of successful leadership. Serving, and I will come to speak a little bit about that more later, it's something that we as leaders in organizations often forget that it's first of all about serving others. And the other connects very well to what I just said, namely showing others the way, leading others the way. Showing others the way for themselves within the organization and as a team how we contribute to the success of the organization. Now these first three points I list here, I would like to call the outer points that a business leader should pay attention to in order to truly live his or her vocation as a business leader. Furthermore, I have 4 additional points that focus more on the inner order within the business leader. The first one of that is that, and this is so important not to forget, leadership is not about techniques, but about character development. It's about character leadership. And around the world, there are many, many excellent MBA programs, there are courses, etc., courses within organizations about leadership. And we very quickly focus on techniques, but it's not about the techniques. That's a secondary thing. It's first about character, about our own character as leaders. Do we have integrity? Do we live what we preach? And do we do that daily? And how do we treat the people who we are responsible for? How do we treat the patrimony that we have been given within the organization? And there's another excellent book I can recommend to you. This is where this is being said. It's about recommended book is Alexander Havard. He wrote a wonderful book which is called Virtuous Leadership. Virtuous Leadership. And in this book he explains that very well. That it's not about techniques. Don't focus too much on the techniques. We should be focusing on our character and how we are an example. The next point is that the key to human development is building on who you already are. There's a wonderful book which sold millions of copies around the world by Tom Rath. It's called Strengths Finder. And it is published by Gallup Press, and it has a whole online form also that helps you to find your strengths. And he says that the key to human development is building on who you already are as a leader. Now, what does he mean to say with that? We tend, in our culture, in our business culture, where we've developed also a lot of feedback conversations that you have and that your superiors have with you, etc. And we tend to focus very much on our weaknesses, to identify weaknesses and to focus on improving those weaknesses, which is good and which is important. But what Tom Rath says, we can very quickly lose sight of our strengths, and of our strengths, I would say, if we focus too much on our weaknesses and too much on improving our weaknesses. Because there are weaknesses that are part of our character that we cannot change or only change with great difficulty. And if we almost exclusively focus on that, we lose the focus on our strengths and further developing our strengths. So the point Tom Rath makes is that he says, yes, let's identify our weaknesses, let's be aware of them, let's see where we can work on them, but let's devote even more time on identifying our strengths and putting these to use in the organization where we have a leadership role, because that will benefit the organization much more. And I think this is a very important point that he makes. The next point, number 6, of the inner development of the leader. And this was said by a great saint of the Catholic Church, Saint Catherine of Siena. She was, by the way, a woman. If we ever talk about the empowerment of women, very often we forget to talk about Saint Catherine of Siena. Because Saint Catherine of Siena was a woman who went around lecturing popes and cardinals and bishops what they were doing wrong and how the church should be reformed and how the many injustices that took place in her time should be taken care of. She's really a wonderful example of strong leadership. And she said something fantastic that still is relevant today. She says, if you are what you are meant to be, you will set the world on fire. If you are what you are meant to be, you will set the world on fire. And I think for any of us in leadership positions, this is essential, because we have to ask ourselves the question in the roles that we are fulfilling. We have to ask ourselves the question, well, am I who am I meant to be? Or am I letting myself be guided by all sorts of pressure, by peer pressure, or by merely looking at getting a higher position or a higher salary? Or am I really following what I feel called to do? Am I really doing what I'm meant to be doing so that I, as she says, that I am whom I am meant to be? And I think this is a question that we should ask ourselves again and again. Because if we as leaders in an organization are not fully convinced that we are doing the right thing, not only doing the right thing, but also that we are on the right place, that we are where we are meant to be in this specific position, taking this responsibility and leading the people whom we are responsible for. If we do not radiate that, coming from an inner conviction, then we will very quickly see the negative results of that in an organization. Because every organization, every department within an organization needs leadership. And leadership has to be lived. Not talked about too much, it has to be lived. And people have to feel and see this person is really convinced about the mission we have and in leading that mission. And if that person is meant where he or she is meant to be, then indeed this person can set the world on fire. The 7th point of the inner development of the leader, I would like to read to you a quote from a novelist from Canada that I like very much. His name is Michael O'Brien. He has written a whole series of novels which are not only good reads, but also novels in which he really goes deep into human nature and really, so to say, researches human nature and tries to find lessons there. And he says something fantastically important and relevant for leaders, which I would like to read to you. He says, a messenger, or read a leader, is in his words, if the messenger is truly himself. His life is his primary word, and his spoken words bear his life. He learns to be this when he has discovered that a man can give to others only what he truly is. A person can give to others only what he or she truly is. Now, this is a very important quote for us leaders to realize day by day. Because he says, the messenger is in his words, so what we say. But those words only make sense when the messenger who speaks those words, when the leader who speaks those words, is truly himself or herself. The second step. Because he then says, his or her life is his primary word. Or in other words, to say, I can give a lot of beautiful speeches and say, a lot of motivating things to my staff, to my employees. But if the life I live, both on the workplace and private, is very different from that word, the words I speak, then what I am trying to say is not very convincing, he says. This is why I said before, leadership is not about techniques, but it's about character. We as leaders have a great responsibility and thus have to continually work on our character. So he says our life is our primary word. So how we live, especially within the organization, how we treat others, how we deal with others. So our life is our primary word. And it's only the life we live that bears the words we say. It's only the life we live that actually give credibility to the words we say. And he says this, he learns this to be this when he has discovered that a man can only give to others what he truly is. So only what we truly are ourselves, only what we believe ourselves, only what we live ourselves as leaders, especially within the organization. Only that which we live ourselves, we can really truly give and pass on to others. This brings me to a concluding point, and that is that I have brought for you a leadership inventory. And if I may just ask you to pass this around. This is a little exercise that I would like to ask you to do today. Doesn't have to be now, it can be later in a break, maybe during lunch break, to take a little time. The leadership inventory is a wonderful document that I have used myself, in which you can rate yourself on your leadership talents and on your leadership qualities, and which is actually a very direct way to try to put into action some of those 7 points that I have just mentioned. And the great thing about the way this seminar is designed today is that the two next speakers, Dr. Meulenbeck and Dr. Donner, my colleagues, will go deeper into this issue. They will speak about conscience and they will speak about virtues. How we develop our conscience, how we are faithful to our conscience, and how we develop the virtues, which are the practical tools of doing the right thing also in difficult situations. Now, this leadership inventory gives a couple of very useful categories in which we can test ourselves. And by the way, if you have the courage to do so, you can also ask somebody else to give you a rating. But that's up to you to do that. I would say start yourself filling out those categories, and then maybe if you want, you can also do so, ask somebody else. And he gives some very important categories along which he works. Building partnerships, sharing leadership, creating a shared vision, developing people, empowering people, achieving personal mastery, encouraging constructive dialogue, demonstrating integrity, leading change. This is very important for us leaders. Anticipating opportunities, ensuring constituency satisfaction, which of course is also very important for a bank, and finally, maintaining a competitive advantage. So the leadership inventory goes according to these categories, and at the end, if you sum up all the ratings and you come to the total, it will give you an analysis of where you are in your leadership development and where you need further development. So I would like to close with encouraging you on the basis of these 7 points and of these leadership to really consider leadership as a vocation, not merely as a job, but as a vocation. Because if you consider leadership as a vocation, the level of responsibility you take as a leader within the organization, and especially you take as a leader towards the people you are responsible for, rises to a whole different level. The father of François Michelin actually said something, and he quotes that in his book that I spoke about earlier. The father of François Michelin actually says it very beautifully. And this might sound like a tall order and difficult to achieve, but I think if you reflect on it and think about it more, what he means, it makes a lot of sense. The father of François Michelin, from whom he overtook the company, I think it was actually his grandfather, says, at the end of the day, the CEO or the leader of the organization or of the department within the organization has to love his people. He has to really love the people he or she is responsible for. And I think in closing, this is a good thought to reflect upon. It comes from a seasoned business leader who said that and who practiced that in his organization. And I think it's something of a good challenge for us to reflect on us. Do we really love the people that we are responsible for? And of course, love in the sense of caring for them. Do we really want the best for them? And I think if we come to this process of reflection, at the end of the day, we will come to the conclusion that if we do so, and once again, it's not always easy because we're all human beings with our strengths and our weaknesses, but if we have this starting point, I am sure that our vocation of a business as a leader will be strengthened, and having this attitude towards the people we are responsible for will actually bring about the best in those people and will lead to further strengths for the organization. So with this concluding thought, I give over to Dr. Meulenbeck to go deeper into the question of conscience.
Thank you.